Lavinia asked if the heaters are on. Yes, I can feel they're on, but I can feel them. But anything above about 10 degrees Celsius I can feel as warm. You might be struggling. It's good to have Marley back with us. We haven't seen you for a while. And it's good to have Ephraim and the family back from the artificial snow. And talking of snow, there's a lot of mountains in Tasmania that have snow, but outside Hobart, on the edge of Hobart, is Mount Wellington. And Mount Wellington stands 1,270 metres or 4,167 feet high. And in the winter time, that is covered with snow. And it's quite impressive if you stand on the eastern side of the Derwent River and you can look across and you can see the city of Hobart rising from water level at the wharves, and then Mount Wellington climbing up behind that. And it's even more impressive to go up to the top of the mountain in summertime on a sunny day, and you can look down and you've got the city of Hobart stretched out below you, you've got the Derwent River going out to the sea in that direction and the Derwent Valley going up, and you can look across to the other side of Hobart and you can see the coastline with all of its bays, peninsulas stretching up the east side there. And I've been to Hobart many times over the years, and it certainly is a beautiful view in the sunny weather. In the cloudy weather, it's a cloud right across the summit there. But, you know, as impressive as Mount Wellington is, when you compare it with some of the major mountain ranges of the earth, Mount Wellington is hardly anything. I've always had a fascination for Mount Everest. Everest stands 8,848 metres or 29,028 feet tall. And that is just about 7 times higher than Mount Wellington. So if you've got a mountain like Everest in mind, you might look at Mount Wellington and say, well, you ain't seen anything yet. There's much more impressive places than that. And we can say that with a lot of things. You know, you're talking to somebody and you're totally impressed and you're showing it to them, and sometimes you'll have somebody say to you, oh, you think that's something? Well, back where I come from, we've got something much bigger, much better, you know, much more expensive than that. And we like to sort of boast about places. Well, Jesus wasn't boasting here in John chapter 1, but he did say to Nathanael, when Nathanael was amazed at Jesus' knowledge, Jesus said, well, I can show you things much greater than that. In fact, if you look here in the passage which Boone read to us, Jesus showed remarkable insight that showed his true nature, but he also said that there were much greater things to come. Early in his ministry, Jesus began calling people to follow him, and here in John's account, verses 40 and 41 in chapter 1, he calls Andrew and Peter, and then in verses 43 and 44 there's Philip. And then as we come to John 1 and verse 45, Philip goes and finds Nathanael. Reading from verse 45, Philip found Nathanael and said to him, we have found him of whom Moses wrote in the law, and the prophets also wrote, Jesus, the son of Joseph from Nazareth. In other words, he's saying this is the one that was prophesied. And Nathanael says to him, can anything good be from Nazareth? So Nathanael shows a rather sceptical response there. And so Philip says to him, well, come and see. Check for yourself. And so Nathanael does go. And here Jesus does something, as I said before, quite remarkable. Verse 47, Jesus saw Nathanael coming to him and said of him, here is truly an Israelite in whom there is no deceit. So even being, shall we say, formally introduced, Jesus can look at the approaching Nathanael and sum up his character. Here is an Israelite in whom there's no deceit. This is not an dishonest man. He's an honest man. And of course, Nathanael is rather perplexed by that. They've only just met. Nathanael says to him in verse 48, how do you know me? Jesus answered and said to him, before Philip called you, when you were under the fig tree, I saw you. You might say, okay, Jesus saw Nathanael. But look at the response of Nathanael in verse 49. Nathanael answered him, Rabbi, which means teacher, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel. Now here's the skeptical Nathanael saying, you're the one. You're the Son of God. You're the King of Israel. And what did Jesus say to him? Well, before Philip called you, when you were under the fig tree, I saw you. How does that statement lead to this response from Nathanael? Jesus just said, I saw you. Well, you have to say, for Nathanael, there was something remarkable in the fact that Jesus saw him. We would have to say that Nathanael thought that he was somewhere private, that he was somewhere alone. The commentaries say that it was common for spiritually minded Jews to find a quiet place of privacy in order to meditate, in order to think about God and things relating to God. Now, we're not told that that's what Nathanael was doing, but it's a possibility. What we can say is, again, in Nathanael's mind, when he was under that fig tree, he saw nobody else around. He was not to be seen by passers-by. Yet Jesus said, even before Philip came to you, I knew where you were. And that would imply that he knew what Nathanael was doing. If Nathanael was thinking of spiritual things, and that's why he'd sought a quiet, private place, then Jesus is indicating he knew about that. And there's something else that's interesting to me about this. Jesus and Nathanael are meeting for the first time. Now, if Jesus has this knowledge about people, you'd have to say he probably didn't pay attention. You know, he saw people around him as he was travelling about and so forth. People over there, people over there, people over there. But he had particularly noticed Nathanael ever before Nathanael came to him, which says to me that Jesus was already aware of Nathanael and the fact that Nathanael was going to be one of those brought to him who would become a follower. Jesus knew that even before Philip went to find him. As one writer, Lenski, says, whatever Nathanael was doing under the fig tree We're not told. It was something of a personal nature between he and God alone, but Jesus knew it. Jesus knew about that. Just as Jesus knew what was in people's thoughts. He knew their characteristics and so forth. In fact, you go just a couple of chapters later to John chapter 4, and we'll read from verse 15. Jesus here is travelling through Samaria, and it's around midday, and the disciples have gone off to purchase some food. Jesus is resting near a well, and a woman of Samaria comes up to draw water, and Jesus engages in conversation with her, and Jesus then says to her in verse 16, sorry, I said 15 before, verse 16, "Go call your husband and come here." Now, Jesus already knows about her. I think Jesus says this as a test to see whether she's going to be open and honest with him. Well, she is. Verse 17, the woman answered and said to him, "I have no husband." Jesus said to her, "You have correctly said, I have no husband." In other words, he said, "I know you don't." Verse 18, "For you have had 5 husbands, and the one whom you now have is not your husband. This which you have said is true." He knows her background. He knows her entire marital history. Her marriages have not been a great success. Jesus has only just met her for the first time. And she hasn't told him that, but he knows. And so the woman says in verse 19, "Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet." And they go on to talk some more, and she mentions the idea of the Messiah, and Jesus says, "Well, I am he." And then the disciples return, and this lady returns to the town, and she says to the people there, the Samaritans, in verse 29, "Come see a man who told me all the things that I have done. This is not the Christ, is he?" See again, Jesus knew her background, and that led her to realize he was somebody outstanding, at least a prophet, and perhaps even more than that, the Messiah. And so we go back to Nathanael, and similarly, when Jesus revealed that he knew more about Nathanael than what Nathanael expected, then Nathanael responds, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God, you are the King of Israel." And then Jesus responds in a way that today would go something like this. You think that's amazing? You haven't seen anything. Verse 50, Jesus answered and said to him, and we're back in John 1, "Because I said to you that I saw you under the fig tree, do you believe? You will see greater things than these." Then he goes on in verse 51 to say, generally speaking, it's a sort of summary. And Jesus says, here's what you're going to see. And you can break it into 2 parts. Verse 51, he said to him, in other words, Jesus said to Nathanael, "Truly, truly, I say to you, you will see heaven opened." Now, if you check in the Greek lexicons, what we have here is a perfect participle, which doesn't mean anything to me. Grammar's not my strong point, but those who know something about the Greek grammar say that this would be saying, "Truly I say to you, you will see heaven having been opened," and the fact that it's a perfect participle means that it has been opened and it's staying opened. That's the idea. You're going to see an open heaven. Well, it's not unusual in the scriptures from time to time to see heaven opened. For instance, we can go all the way back to Ezekiel chapter 1 and verse 1 in the Old Testament, and Ezekiel begins his book this way. "Now it came about in the 30th year on the 5th day of the 4th month while I was by the river Chebar among the exiles, the heavens were opened and I saw visions of God. This is taking us back to the time of the Babylonian captivity. And Ezekiel is with the Jewish exiles in Babylon, and he says the heavens were opened. And he goes on to describe the fact that he had seen visions of God. And you can read on about that. You can go back to Matthew chapter 3, where Jesus is baptized, and notice there verses 16 and 17. After he was baptized, Jesus came up immediately from the water, and behold, the heavens were opened, and he saw the Spirit of God descending as a dove and settling on him. And behold, a voice from heaven said, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." And we know from John chapter 1 that John the Baptist was there, he saw that. And part of that was the heavens were opened. Or just to take one more example, we can go over to Acts the 7th chapter and verses 54 and onwards. Here you've got Stephen, who's been brought before the Jewish Sanhedrin, the Jewish council. They are not happy with him, and Stephen says this, beginning in verse 55, "But he, being full of the Holy Spirit, looked intently into heaven and saw the glory of God and Jesus standing at the right hand of God. And he said, Behold, I see the heavens opened and the Son of Man standing at the right hand of God." So there's various occasions where people see heaven opened, and they see something relating to that, but then it moves on. But what Jesus is saying to Nathanael in John chapter 1 and verse 51 is, "Truly, truly, I say to you, you will see heaven having been opened." And the idea is it's standing open. That's the way it is. And then Jesus goes on to say, you will see heaven opened and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man. So the angels rising and coming down again between heaven and earth, but particularly with the Son of Man. And I'll come to that in just a moment. But this idea of angels of God ascending and descending, where does that come from? Well, Jesus appears to be referring back to the time of Jacob in Genesis, the book of Genesis, and we'll particularly notice Genesis chapter 28. And in a moment I'll read from Genesis 28 and verse 10. But recently I mentioned Jacob and Esau, the twin brothers, Esau being the first of them to be born. And remember how Jacob manipulated Esau. He got Esau to give him, Jacob, his rights as the firstborn, just for a plate of food. And then later, at his mother's urging, Jacob deceives his blind father, Isaac, into giving him the blessing that should have gone to Esau. And Esau is so upset about that, he says he's going to kill Jacob. And so the mother says to Jacob, "You better get out of here for a while." And so he heads right up to the northeast to a place called Haran, to part of the extended family up there. And Jacob sets out on that very lengthy journey, and we'll pick it up in Genesis chapter 28 and verse 10. Jacob departed from Beersheba and went towards Haran, and he happened upon a particular place and spent the night there because the sun had set. And he took one of the stones of the place and made it a support for his head and lay down in that place. And he had a dream, and behold, a ladder was set up on the earth with its top reaching to heaven. And behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. Then, because the Lord was standing above it, then behold, the Lord was standing above it and said, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and to your descendants. Your descendants will also be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. And in you and in all your descendants, And in you and in your descendants shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Behold, I am with you and will keep you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Then Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, The Lord is certainly in this place, and I did not know it. And he was afraid and said, How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. So what's the story here? Well, he has this dream. There's a ladder extending from earth all the way to heaven, and angels of God are coming and going. And God speaks to him. And God says that he is going to be with Jacob and will fulfill his plans through Jacob and will bless both Jacob and his descendants. And he will look after Jacob. And the land where Jacob is, that will become the land of Israel. But what this is saying, that the significance of the ladder, the angels coming and going, is that heaven is in touch with earth. And angels are coming and going between the two places, and God has his plans, and God is going to carry out his plans in that place with that man, Jacob. And so we come back to John, the first chapter, and verse 51, where Jesus says, you will see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man. Again, the idea there is that heaven's in touch with earth, and God is in touch with earth. But you'll notice here, the angels were ascending and descending on the Son of Man. Back in Jacob's time, they were coming and going to the earth, and the idea there was God was going to use that place in his plans, the land of Israel. Here, the focus is upon the Son of Man. Now, who's the Son of Man? Well, that phrase is used a lot in regard to Jesus. In fact, the International Standard Bible Encyclopedia says that the phrase appears more than 80 times in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And we say, oh, Son of Man, that's probably emphasizing the human side of Jesus, that he was both God and man. But there's something more significant to it. If you go back to Daniel chapter 7, there's an image there, a picture there of one like the Son of Man, or like a Son of Man, being presented to God and being given a kingdom. And that has what we call a messianic idea. The Messiah was to be the one sent by God, the one appointed by God. And he was going to be granted a kingdom. Well, the Son of Man is Jesus Christ. So the angels of God are going to be ascending and descending upon Jesus. God has chosen Jesus, and God is going to work through Jesus. And heaven is in touch with Jesus, and God is in touch with Jesus. There's a tie there. And so this is no ordinary man. And what's Jesus saying here to Nathanael? Now, Nathanael is impressed by the fact that Jesus, having only just met him, can identify something of his character. But Jesus says, that's nothing to what you will see. You will see heaven open. You will see angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man. What, literally? Were there going to be angels coming and going? Was there going to be a sort of open gap in the sky above Jesus that was there for Nathanael to see? I don't think so. There's no indication of that. Now, yes, angels were involved in the life and the ministry of Jesus. It was an angel who came and told Mary that she was going to have a son, Jesus. There was the angels who announced the birth of Jesus to the shepherds who were out in the field. Angels came to Jesus when he was in the wilderness at the time of his temptation. But again, whilst that happened on a number of occasions, you don't find that happening all the time if you read through the Gospels. So the indication to me is Jesus here is speaking figuratively, just as when Jacob saw the angels coming and going, he was seeing a dream, a vision if you like, within the dream. So with Jesus, he's saying figuratively what is going to be happening. And Nathanael will see what? We'll see God working through Jesus. We'll see a close contact between heaven and Jesus, a close bond, if you like, between God and Jesus. Jesus carrying out the work of God, and that would occur in all sorts of ways, and miracles particularly will stand out there. And so Jesus is saying to Nathanael here, all right, you're impressed by the fact that I know you. I know your character. I know where you were. I know what you were doing. I was aware of you ever before you were aware of me. But Jesus says, what you are going to see will be much greater than that. And if you think of Jesus' ministry and the miracles and so forth, there were going to be amazing things over the next 3 years or so that Nathanael and the other disciples would behold. But what about us? What's the message to us? Well, we're not in the same situation as Nathanael was. We're not in a position where we're physically with Jesus and we actually witness the things that Jesus does and hears what Jesus says. But whatever Nathanael saw, we know about too, because we have the record of it. We have the record of his ministry. We have a record of the remarkable things that Jesus did. And as I've said many times, this is not mythology, it's not fairy story. This is reliable history. You can look at the geography, you can look at the biography of various characters. You can look at the history, you can look at the politics that are involved here, and it's all correct. You can check it in an encyclopedia, Dr. Google, or wherever. What this book tells us is full of historical accuracy. And so we have this reliable record of the life, of the ministry, of the actions of Jesus. Now, Nathanael, yes, he was there. He experienced it, as it were, face to face. And so, having seen what Jesus had done, he's able to say, you are the Son of God, you are the King of Israel. We get the same thing over in John chapter 20 in regard to the somewhat skeptical Thomas, who refuses to believe the other disciples when they say, we've seen Jesus. Thomas says, I've got to see for myself. Well, he does, And so on the basis of what he's seen, he says in John 10:20, verse 28, "My Lord and my God." You say, yeah, it's not fair. They were there. They saw. But look at what John goes on to say in John 20 and verse 30. "So then many other signs Jesus also performed in the presence of the disciples, which are not written in this book, but these have been written." You've got a record. And I put this to you, much of what you believe about life and about subjects you studied at school, you learn not by being there, you learned from books. You had textbooks, and you've still got books. And you read that, and that gives you knowledge. So, John has communicated knowledge to us. He wrote a book of evidences. That book being called the Gospel of John. And if we accept the evidence, then that can have an impact upon us, just as it had an impact on Nathanael. John 20 and verse 31. "But these have been written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name." So it'll do two things if you really read the record in a thoughtful manner. Number one, you will believe that Jesus is indeed the Christ, the Son of God. And that will lead to you receiving life in his name. Now, that's not talking about physical life, because people have physical life whether they believe in Jesus or not. This is talking about spiritual life, and with spiritual life is eternal life. So just as Nathanael could be with Jesus and learn about Jesus and thus devote himself to Jesus, so we can read about Jesus as though we were there and can turn to him. Going back to John chapter 14 and verse 6, when Jesus was with the disciples there, Jesus said, "I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." You want to find the way? That's Jesus. You want to find the truth? That's Jesus. You want to find the life? That's Jesus. And you can learn about him. But how do I know it's Jesus? Look at the evidence. Verse 8, Philip said to him, "Lord, show us the Father, and it is enough for us." Jesus said to him, "Have I been with you for so long a time, and yet you have not come to know me, Philip? The one who has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, 'Show us the Father'? Do you not believe that I am in the Father and the Father is in me? We are one." And Jesus says, "You can see that." He says that to Philip. But it's there for us to see as well in this record that we have. It is quite possible that Nathanael was the Apostle Bartholomew. Why two names? It brings out two aspects. Nathanael means God has given, but Bartholomew shows the family link here. Bartholomew means son of Ptolemy. Just as in Scotland, people called Mac. Mac means son of. In the Bible, when you see Bar, it means son of. Certainly we know that Nathanael maintained contact with Jesus because we read about him again in John chapter 21 and verse 2, where he is with the other disciples fishing in the Sea of Galilee following Jesus' resurrection, and Jesus comes and has breakfast with them and talks to them. So Nathanael was in contact throughout Jesus' ministry. When we first meet him, back in John chapter 1, he's rather sceptical. Philip has come to tell him, "We've found the Messiah." And Nathanael says, "Can anything good be from Nazareth?" But once Nathanael was presented with the evidence, He was convinced. And he said, Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel. And Nathanael remained committed to Jesus. He's there in John chapter 1 and he's still there in John chapter 21. So, what did Jesus say to Nathanael? Truly, truly, I say to you, you will see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man. You will see heaven linked with earth and with me. You will see God linked with me. You will see God working in me and through me. God, heaven, and Jesus Christ were all and are all closely connected. And the evidence supports that fact. So what do we need to do? Study the evidence. Go where the evidence leads you. Accept who Jesus is. Turn to Jesus and be committed to him. Be faithful unto death, as it says in the book of Revelation. This isn't just fairy stories. It isn't taking a leap of blind faith. Jesus showed Nathanael that he was from God, and he's shown it to us as well. The evidence is all there. We need to follow it. Let's stand and sing.